Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and get started right on the dot of 11 because we have 45 minutes and a lot of things to tell you about. Thanks for joining us for What Do the Users Really Think? User experience and usability from all sides of the table. I am Allison Bradley. I'm a librarian at Davidson College and, one of the research team on the Charlotte Initiative. That's a Mellon-funded project to investigate the sustainability of ebook acquisitions by academic libraries. My work on that project focused on the ways that user experience with ebooks is studied, and I realized that looking at the approaches taken at libraries, presses, platform companies, and aggregators could make for a really interesting conversation, because we're all doing similar work in different ways with different intentions. So that interesting conversation is going to happen right now. It'll be interesting, but it will be fast because we have 5 panelists and only 45 minutes. I'll introduce each member of the panel, share their affiliation, and who they typically see as their primary user group when they do this type of work. First, we have Allison Villain from Duke University Press. She's the Associate Director for Digital Strategy and Systems. The primary user group that they study to guide their online content platform planning is users who are conducting research, typically graduate, student level and above, faculty and professional researchers, but they also study for designing and optimizing their marketing and e-commerce site, which would focus on librarians who are existing customers or prospective customers, scholars seeking a publisher, and journal editors and societies. Next, we have Tom Beyer from Sheridan Pub Factory. I corrected the title. Yes, good. He's the Director of Platform Services, and they are essentially always trying to consider 3 separate classes of users: the end user of the product or platform, the purchaser of the product or platform, which would typically be a librarian for a scholarly subscription product but can vary depending on the product or publisher in question, and the publisher of the product or platform that's choosing their services. The priority between those populations would vary depending on the product, but generally would go in that order given. Next, we have Tara Catalda, who's the Science Collections Coordinator at the University of Florida, and also a researcher on the IMLS-funded project researching student information choices. In her role at Florida, the primary users would be her undergrads, graduate students, and faculty. But in her, aside from her day job at her research project, they are studying students in elementary, middle, and high school, as well as students enrolled in community colleges, undergraduates, and graduates in the university setting. We have Kate Lawrence, the VP for UX Research and Design at EBSCO Information Services. And she is, her primary user group is academic users, whether that's students at the elementary school level or all the way up through graduate school. Last, we have Chan Lee, data analyst at the California Digital Library. The CDL is responsible for negotiating licenses of online content on behalf of the entire University of California community. So their user group includes more than 238,000 students, 190,000 faculty and staff. So what we're going to talk about today are the different ways that these people from very different parts of our profession all address user experience and research. The first question that I'm going to have them all speak to is, who is your primary audience? When you're doing UX research, who is the primary audience that you study? And what do for your findings and your results, how are you typically going to share what you found when you do this research? Chan, could we start with you?
Okay.
Who is the audience for your work?
All right. So I think I can talk from the perspectives from libraries who license scholarly publications for our students and faculties. So the biggest audience for our user research study is our collection development officers who make business decisions on what we need to license because we're constantly faced with financial challenges. And there are 2 challenges there we're faced mostly. One is the rising cost of the scholarly publication. And I think there are 2 factors for that. One is commercialization of the scholarly publication, and also the acceleration of research productivity worldwide. There's just too many content to license. And actually, the content we license is very well used by UC users. I'll give you the statistics. Every year, there are about 40 million articles downloaded by our UC populations. And that translates to over 100,000 downloads per day. And if you compare that with Sci-Hub, which is the global download, there are about like 20 million downloads for 6 months. And for our one institution, well, UC system, we have, they have 28 million downloads for 6 months, and we have 20 million downloads just for one system. So, the resources is very well used. However, because of the challenges, the financial, and there are just a lot of content to license, we have to make selections. So that was the one big reason that we wanted to do the user research. And the other thing is that the emergence of the ebooks, who complement but do not fully replace the print books. So the need for both print and electronic create budgetary challenges for our libraries, and which might continue for a while. And we still know so little about how ebook are used by our users. And we often see the headlines like ebook sales slip and print is far from dead. And also, we anecdotally hear from our users that they still want to print. However, we don't have space for print. There's a budget situation. So how should we do? So we really wanted to learn more about how our users interact with ebook content and whether we should continue to purchase more and more ebooks from that regard. And the other group, the second big group, I think, is our library administrators, because the user study, I think, that often help us to strategize our overall approach. The findings would help our administrators to think about the organization priorities. If we find out, if we hear that so much complaint about inconsistent ebook platform that our users have, is there a role for libraries to design our own platform so that we provide a more consistent way? So I think those are type of questions that the user research findings will help us to share.
Great, thank you. Tara, would you like to go next?
When I think about the way I would give information about the user studies that we are doing or reading about, I kind of think about it in layers, and the first layer being informing my colleagues at my institutions first, which may seem a kind of course you do. You talk to them every day, but there's 80 librarians at my institution, and I go months and months without seeing some of them. And then there's the layers of administrations. I don't see my deans every day. So I have to actually work at getting information to them where I've done studying, I'm like, oh, this is so interesting, and everybody needs to know about this for their teaching or for what they're deciding to buy, in terms of ebooks or any other content. So I have to work at that by going and saying to my associate dean, hey, can I get 30 minutes at your next quarterly meeting for the unit so that we can talk about this and have a conversation. And so that's layer one for me. And then another layer is going out to different conferences where we can talk to more librarians and the producers of information, the publishers and the vendors, and to get their feedback and give feedback on what we've been learning from studying our students. And then the final layer for us is putting it out there into publications, into whether it's a peer-reviewed journal articles, white papers, our new formats, and getting it at that top level where you can go really, more globally, because you're not limited by the in-person interactions. So I'd say I think about it in layers and all the people that we want to reach when we have information to share.
Great, thank you. Tom, who do you see as your audience for this type of work, and how do you share the results?
Sure. So as a platform vendor, really our primary audience is the publishers that we're working with. They are, after all, the ones who are paying us to build the platforms. But and also they are the ones that really know the content that the platform encompasses, the users, what they're really trying to do. And so that's certainly super important for us, because it changes quite a bit from platform to platform and publisher to publisher, depending on who their user audience is. But I think what we try to do is bring best practices from our, the history of our work to bear on their ideas, and to really make sure that they are reaching out to their user base, and so that is informing the interfaces that we build for them. And the other thing that we try to do a lot is that we are increasingly building in testing facilities into the platforms itself, so that we can do A/B testing even after the platform is launched, because a lot of the decisions you make in the user interface are, there aren't necessarily clear signals about what the best thing to do is. And so having the ability to set up tests in the live environment and watch what your users are doing is super informative, especially if you've got particular sort of use cases or things you're trying to get the users to do or make it easier for them to find in the platform. So it's always sort of a balance, though, because the publishers also are selling to a population that may be different from the population that's actually using the platforms. And so there's this sort of three-way dance. And then, as Dara said, in terms of trying to reflect what we've learned, we try to come to conferences and have discussions about it. We read the literature constantly, because and as not only sort of the written literature, but also just going and using other sites, and seeing sort of what's becoming the standards, both in the academic world, but also in the mainstream, sort of online world. Because ultimately, unless we really have to, we actually don't want to build, interfaces that are sort of really innovative. We want things to be as obvious and straightforward and sort of intuitive as possible.
Great, thanks. Allison?
So at Duke, we publish about 120 books a year and over 50 journals. And we publish mostly in the humanities and social sciences. And I don't think that we are unique in that if you were to ask several years ago, who are our customers, who are our users, what you would hear back is, oh, they're our authors. So there's this sort of shorthand of the people we have the closest contact with and know the best, our authors and our editors, are just like the scholars and readers and users of our research. And now we're to the point where we're smart enough to question that assumption. So the primary audience of any user research we're doing is internal. And so I lead efforts on platform building. I bring that back to my marketing and sales team. I compare notes with my library relations and sales manager from what she's hearing from the library community. And we just try to disseminate what we think we've learned about user behaviors through the research and studies that we're able to do. And then, like everyone else, more broadly, I hope to share it across the community. I mean, one thing that we found as a humanities publisher, publishing journals and now books onto platforms, is that so much, what literature there is about information-seeking behaviors and use of digital resources is in the STM world. So we found that we had to kind of plow some new ground to figure out, well, what does a postdoc do? A post-PhD instructor or an almost PhD doing when they're trying to find and use material like ours. And then another key audience is our platform vendor. They can't, the platforms can't know everything about every publisher and every publisher's publishing context. So we feel like we have a responsibility for being able to speak knowledgeably about our user base to our platform partner to help shape the interfaces that they're designing on our behalf.
Great, thanks. Kate?
Hi, thank you. I have really strong opinions on this, so buckle in, because I'm a straight shooter, and I'm gonna talk to you about some of the challenges that we face and some of the lessons that we've learned at EBSCO. I can tell you that when user research moved from technology to product management, it was a new day, because when user research is being done within technology, it felt like a version of QA. Like, oh no, here she comes, wait, she's going to tell us what's wrong with that thing that's going to launch in 2 weeks. And so when user research moved to product management, it became much richer and deeper than just usability testing. It became the fuel in that evidence-based product development cycle and product development process. So I feel strongly that research has to be at the beginning, at the inception, where product services are being thought about and talked about before a solution is designed. So that's number one. I also want to make the point that at EBSCO, our primary audience for the delivery of findings and insights is internal customers. And so those internal customers can be technologists. We just recently implemented a large-scaled Agile framework. So we have these individual Agile release teams that are working across the company. So sometimes it's the developers on those teams, but more often it is product management folks who are working to understand the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem of the ebook user, so we know what enhancements we need to make in the viewer, for example. What I'd like to make sure people understand is that we've learned this lesson at EBSCO. If you're not doing collaborative strategic partnering with your product management folks up front, then you're a research order taker and your impact is going to be lessened. And the way to have more impact and have those findings carry through the product development process is to do that strategic partnering up front. So when we launch an ebook test, for example, or an ebook study, we are doing it in close collaboration with those product owners. And the reason is because when the findings are delivered, they don't have legs. They're not actionable if that's the first time the folks have heard about it and talked about it. And you also don't want people poking at the sample and poking at what you asked and what you studied. You want that collaboration right up front. I will also encourage everybody in the room to research something that Tomer Sharon has been publishing. He's a former user researcher at Google. He now works at a company called WeWork. And he really set the user research world on fire earlier this year when he published an article on Medium called Democratization of UX. One of the statements he made is, look, people aren't reading research reports buried in a repository. And you know what? That's painful, but he's right. And he's right to talk about creating what's called a research nuggets database. Because people who are interested in ebooks or search or authentication should be able to go to a central repository and do a search and find a playlist, find a search result for just that topic. Because a report is often far-reaching. Now, I worked for a boss early in my career who recommended, he strongly urged me to write up findings in the form of a white paper. And that is terrific, and it's a great academic exercise. Nobody read them. So what we started doing, and I understand completely what the fellow members of my panel are saying, which is, publish a white paper, put it out there. I get that. For my audience at EBSCO, they're not looking for a white paper. They're looking for, I have to distill it down and synthesize it into a PowerPoint deck. And then I have to become a walking, talking evangelist of those findings. And I have to carry them through every other meeting and initiative I have. So I encourage folks to read that Medium article on the democratization of UX, because based on that, EBSCO is creating its own searchable database of research nuggets internally, and also we've themed our year 2017 in terms of user research. This is the year of the big share. We're going to increase transparency, and we're going to empower people to do their own research and add their own nuggets to that database, because the more people who do research at EBSCO, the better those products will be.
Okay, thank you so much. You have beautifully led us into the second question and mostly answered it, I think, which is how do you make your research actionable? So what are you hoping that the people you share these results with are going to do? How do you make that happen? Allison, do you want to address that for Duke?
So the first major effort we undertook was an observational study where we sat with about, I think, somewhere just under 20 PhD graduate students, just got their PhD, early career, and asked them to conduct a search, sit down and conduct a research session. So it was a little artificial, but it was as close as we could get. I envy Tara's study where she's able to control the search results they saw. But it was very informative. It produced a huge amount of observational information, and I first tried to write a report and we thought about publishing, and I ended up with a PowerPoint. And that ended up being the best way to communicate that information within the organization, and I was able to take it to conferences and things like that. So then with our, taking that and other research that we had done and trying to go to the next level, where we have ended up focusing our efforts to make it actionable is on the creation of personas. So boiling our observations down to these bios with people who have names and faces, and they're described in bullet points on one sheet. And that's where we're trying to make it digestible and disseminatable across the organization. So what we have found is, our goal is that anytime we're making a UX decision or even a business decision, that our goal is that somebody says, well, how does that work for Lynn? Is Lynn going to like that? Lynn is one of our personas. That's the goal. We're not there yet. Our marketing and sales group is very open to this. It takes time and practice. Our editorial team, a bit less so. And again, that's because they have such close interaction with our scholarly partners who edit our journals and write our books. And so that's their focus, and it's kind of hard for them to wrap their head around that the consumer of those scholarly books and journals may not be consuming it and wanting to find it and use it in the way that they and the author intend for it to be used. So, that's a challenge that I see inside the publishing house for this persona-based approach. But we're going to keep knocking away on it.
I wanted to make a note. Allison makes an excellent point about distilling down findings into key themes and then channeling those into personas. Design user personas are excellent tools. They are aggregations of qualities, they're archetypes, and having personas and then having teams have access to personas, and then recruiting representative panels of users that can then, there can be a question answer back and forth, additional surveys as questions come up later on. That is an excellent, excellent way to bring the users and the user voice close to that development process.
And you just reminded me of the fact that we are in the process not only of redesigning our online content platform, but we're also building a new e-commerce and marketing platform for our press website and our catalog and e-commerce. And that platform is bringing with it a lot of marketing tools that we've never had, marketing automation, but also a lot of usability tools that we've never had. It's got A/B testing built in, but it also has persona-based actions and persona-based logging. So there's not going to be a one-to-one relationship between our usability personas and these personas, but we wouldn't have been in a position to even think about taking advantage of these tools if we hadn't gone through this exercise.
Great, thank you. Tom, do you want to speak to how you can make your research actionable and how you try and get your audience to do what you want with your findings?
Folks to do what you want.
Yeah, so to echo what Allison and Kate said, we've certainly made extensive use of personas on many of our projects, and because we have a core platform that's been in existence for a while, a lot of this is already sort of built in. So a lot of the work that we're doing now is actually more involved in terms of watching how the usage is on the platform and reflecting that back. So a lot of what we're doing is taking real usage data and going to our publishers and saying, let's really look at what's going on here and pull it out, because oftentimes we do have very different sets of users on the platform trying to do different sets of things. So pulling out the personas and then really looking at how the usage patterns are going, using A/B testing to then sort of help inform how to improve things, if we do see issues with the way their platforms are being used and move on that way.
Great, thank you. Tara?
I At first, I have to tell Kate that I read white papers, and I cite them.
Librarians will say to us, can you please publish that? So we're working on that. And the other piece of it is you can also publish infographics. It's a little quicker and it's also citable. So we're working on it.
Love infographics, but I know I'm in the majority and a total nerd, but I do. In terms of actionable research, this is an area where I do think publishers in developing their platforms really do a better job than in often a library science research cycle, in that you do your user testing and then you put up your platform and then you continue testing and make changes. Where often we'll do the research and we'll put it out there, and at the end of every kind of paper they want what are your recommendations for practice, and you put them in there, and then it stops. You don't often see where, okay, who took those recommendations, who implemented them, who's going to give you feedback on how they worked. I can certainly impact my own practice as a practitioner and a researcher, and I can kind of nudge my colleagues and get feedback from them, but from a wider audience, I would like to see more of that cycle. And the current project that we're doing is very, very much in our minds to make sure that it doesn't have a stopping point, and then that when we use the information we find out and make recommendations, that we are going to go around and test the recommendations ourselves and keep the project and the conversation and the cycles going.
So the first I think I can see the definition of action is very different between the publishers and libraries. So for publishers, action is probably to make better products, and for libraries to purchase a better product. So we do at our institution, UC system, we do a lot of exploratory and behavior studies, and I think the way to make our research findings more actionable, the one thing I learned is to make the question themselves actionable. I like what Henry Ford said. He said, if I have asked my customers what they want, they would have told me a faster horse. I think it doesn't mean that there's no value of market research. I think it just means that, it means it's valuable, but caring deeply about what users want is very different from keep asking what they want. So one thing, I think we need to discover the desires that have not yet formed. We should think about, read the things that are maybe not on the paper yet, just discover what the potential there. So the ebook and print book is a very hot topic for libraries, because we want to make decisions what's our priorities are and what we should license. So we have done a lot of behavior studies on the ebook and print. So if we keep asking our users, what do you want? Do you want a print or do you want an e? I can guarantee you 100% that they would say both. But that really doesn't help us with any decision making. I think we need to figure out why do they still want to print? Why do they want to have both? And to figure out whether there's any opportunities there for ebooks if we wanted to move into that direction. And I personally think there are a lot of opportunities for the ebooks, even though when we did a focus group study with our graduate students at UC Santa Cruz, majority of them saying they use print for their last book use and they like print. But I still think there are many opportunities. So I would just give you a few examples about why I think that, and how should we deal with the user study in future. One thing is a lot of users talk about the physicality of their print books, then it's often linked to their deep reading behavior, linked to their comprehension. But I realize when we talk with users, most of them comparing with reading on the e-readers, and they have much better experience with that, because the e-readers give users actually a sort of kind of physicality, because the text is more defined and they can hold them. So that's I think that's an opportunity there for the ebooks. I think the device is very important. So that's one thing. And the other example I have is about the annotations. A lot of our users talk about the value of annotations. They wanted to use that. And also they value the sharing feature of annotations. And they like print because when they borrow the books from our libraries, they can see the markups, the annotations from other users, which it shouldn't happen, right? But that's one of the reasons they like print books, is because they can see that. But don't you think that's actually easier to share the annotation on a digital platform? So, I totally see that as another big opportunities for ebooks for that.
Great.
And
Thank
also
you. Thanks, Jan.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We
I'll stop
only
there.
have a few minutes left, and I wanted to open up our last question to the entire panel. It's been touched on a little bit already, but what I'm really most interested in hearing from you is, how does your work intersect? Many of your audiences are primarily internal. You do this work to share with your colleagues, with your clients, with your vendors, with your partners. Are there ways that we can cross those boundaries? Are there ways that we can collaborate more, be it a white paper or an infographic? How could we stop duplicating efforts and actually have a shared conversation around what our communal user base might actually think about our products? And I'll open it up to the whole group, whoever grabs the mic first.
So I'll go first because I feel that I'm in the position of being right in the middle of the entities represented here. So the librarians are our customers who we hope find our platforms and products usable, compelling, critical, essential, and will buy them. And then we rely on our platform partners to actually build those platforms. And so, Cambridge University Press just launched Cambridge Core earlier, I think in 2016. And that's an example of a university press that has built its own platform. And so they had a high degree of control. And I know that they put an extensive amount of usability studies, personas, user journeys into building it. And it looks beautiful and seems, just from my outside perspective, very usable. We operate at a different scale than Cambridge University Press, and that scale dictates a lot about our ability to either implement user experience findings and desires, or to be responsive to what we might find out. So our situation is that so we're rebuilding our platform, redesigning it. We're working with Silverchair to do that, and we start with an RFP, and there's a certain amount of money we have and a certain amount of time we have, and choosing a partner and getting to a contract with that partner is all about making sure that timeline and that price can be hit. And so along the way, we make certain compromises, and those compromises are, for instance, well, what is your standard template? And how does it look? And do I think it basically serves the needs of our users to the degree I understand them? Okay, yes, to keep our costs manageable, we will take that. So then as we're building and we're engaging the library community through our advisory board with questions, they're excited, they're nervous, they're really engaged, which is wonderful. And we're starting to field questions like, will I be able to see an early version? I want to see an early version. I can give you feedback. I can do testing for you. Again, wonderful engagement, but it won't be actionable for us. That's a lose-lose situation for us because I've got to migrate 40,000 articles and 2,300 books by November. There's no time and there is no money to take that, we agreed, yes, we'll use the template with a few tweaks. There's no time to take that and other core technologies provided by the platform like search and even more fundamentally library and administration tools and do anything about it. And then there are aspects of the platform that no platform would let us tell them how to change it. So for instance, the library admin tools. Every one of their customers and all of their customers use those. So there's just, at this moment in time where you would think, oh, Duke Press is redesigning their platform, this is a great time to get a lot of feedback and do some iterative design and some testing, we have absolutely no ability to do that. So where we are then at this intersection is we will launch the site And then we will start getting feedback, and then we will start doing studies, and then we'll start trying to iteratively work it into our roadmap to be responsive to those.
Great, thank you. Kate, would you like to speak about the Nugget database a little bit? I think that's...
So we talked about how at EBSCO, for research, our customer is typically internal, and it's product management folks and others. And what I can say is eventually that pivots to also include customers, and not just our internal customers. So what happens is once we synthesize the findings, we're then able to, yes, inform product and service development and decisions. We're also able to weave it into a larger narrative that is then shared with customers and users throughout the world via webinars, conference talks, and also classes. We do a fair amount of teaching, lean ethnography, other how students conduct search. And so these form into a series of talks that we're able to deliver. And one of our objectives as part of our Year of the Big Share, thanks to Tomer Sharon, as part of our theme of the Big Share this year, that's internal and external. It's bringing our customers and the larger library community along on this journey of learning about their customers, the end user. And so when we talk about what we've learned about how students conduct scholarly research, and what is that balance between scholarly sources and open web searching, and what's that journey like, and what are some of the personas involved in that, and what do we know about physicians and how they search at the point of care, and nurses using clinical tools at the bedside. We have that research, and as part of this year of sharing information, we are going to be delivering that in the form of infographics, white papers, webinars, knowledge sharing, because having the research sit in a repository does none of us any good.
Tara, you've already promised us that you read white papers yourself. Do you have are there other thoughts about?
And I do think, opportunities like this and need to be taken advantage of more. Conferences, white papers, other papers. The Charleston conference has always been a big place that I love to go just for that intersections happening. And I think this is my first time at SSP. I think this is going to be one too, because I think this is great, and I learned so much. And not just librarians and publishers and vendors, but that have the researchers, the authors, the students. Taking every opportunity to bring those groups together, and it kind of just widens your things. I love having visits from my representatives from the company, and we have great conversations, but there's that one-on-one, there's limits, and they're going to have, and I have to go talk to my manager, and I'll give that to the product team, and I'll give that to this team. But in this, where a lot of those people are all here in the same room, it gives great conversations, and I hope we just take more advantage of that. I just want to give one excellent example from another conference where the vendor was doing a presentation. The audience was mostly librarians, but it happened to be on a campus, and they must have done it an hour before. The vendor pulled the students from off the street to make their panel. I don't know what they offered them. They got them. It was fascinating. It was great to have all this. It was so enlightening. Intersections like that are just magical. Again, I'm a total nerd, but.
So I totally see the value of collaborating with publishers and vendors. I think is so important, not just because we negotiate the business terms, but also, we want the best features and best things for our users. And I feel like a lot of our business models right now, they have focused on the self-interest rather than the user experience. So I would take the DRM as example. So when we talk with our users about ebooks, 80% of the time they're complaining about DRM restrictions, like they couldn't download their watermarks. I can understand this is probably a not technological problem, barrier. This is a business decision. But it really hurts our users. They couldn't get access to it, and I think in the long run, it will hurt publishers and vendors' business. It will not protect the publishers. So, if the users cannot get access to content, they will find somewhere else, like Sci-Hub. So, I do think that's very important that we collaborate on that. And also there's a challenge, like Allison mentioned, about how to get input from the libraries. What's the timing of that? And we often do that when we negotiate with publishers with sales departments. And I can tell you this is not a good channel, because I feel like a lot of information there got lost. It didn't go to the right departments. And like Kay said, EBSCO and other companies are doing a lot of user studies, but we don't hear that, and we don't know how to collaborate on that. So I think we need to find a better, efficient way to collaborate, and the timing between the libraries and the publishers.
Great, thank you. Tom, is there anything you'd like to say for that? Great.
It's mostly just reiterating what people have said. I mean, we do find the conferences, and Charleston's a great example of a venue where we can pull together librarians and publishers and researchers, all together, and that's always a really informative way to share information. And we find that, we're trying to disseminate. We're often asking questions, but we're also sort of disseminating research that we've found. But we also get so much back from what you end up learning a huge amount. So we try to do that as often as we can.
Great, thank you all so much. We've saved just a few minutes for questions from the audience, but I also wanted to share with you that if you'd like to talk more, we have email addresses for all 5 panelists, and we're planning to offer an online follow-up session open to the public on June 29th. So if you have questions and you don't want to ask them in the next 4.5 minutes, if you're desperate to get to that box lunch immediately on time.
I'm John Dove, and I'm just building on Kate's point about how to move things to the beginning part of the process. Tom, I remember interviewing you about 4 years ago for ALA Quarterly about these topics, and one of the things you expressed in that interview was the misunderstanding of many of your prospects, because they didn't understand that you needed to invest that time. So I'm just curious, in these 4 years now, I mean, you have a big track record now, so it's really easy to show the reasons for doing this. Are you finding that now your new prospects kind of get it, that you need to invest this time, or is it still like it was 4 years ago?
No, I mean, people understand that they need to invest the time. I think one of the things that has changed is that we, instead of sort of convening big sort of user groups or focus groups, we try to incorporate it much more into the sort of ongoing running stream of the product development that we're doing. We're a very agile shop, and so the tests are so very tightly bound to what we're building all the time, and our project managers and our technologists and our publishers are working very closely together all the time and asking small questions and shooting them out and getting feedback as quickly as possible from end users and librarians as we're working, as opposed to sort of trying to do sort of big research products. So that's sort of the way it's evolved for us.
We'll add that to the slide later.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point that Tom gestured to a little bit earlier, which is analytics is a game changer. So when we built our first platform back in 2005, there wasn't anything. So all these myths around, our audience are our authors, there was no counter narrative that would convince us. So, and even beyond that simple false equivalency. But when Google Analytics was installed and we actually started seeing, we think it's really important that we post the advertising section as a PDF for all of our issues. Well, how important is it? Well, let's go check how many times it's been downloaded. Twice in a year. So analytics have been incredibly clarifying.
Kate talked about a Nuggets database.
Yes, I didn't name that Tomer Sharon. That's his name for it. But it's
Okay,
the
so it's-
smaller pieces of
Right.
the smaller themes.
Okay, and the smaller pieces, it sounds like they reside within PowerPoints, or what is the medium you use to communicate the nuggets?
Great question. What Tomer does is he associates an insight with an artifact, and that can be, one of our testing tools is usertesting.com when we do remote testing. So let's imagine that we had a user talking about the frustration of not being able to get into scholarly resources via his or her library website. We might make a clip and associate a blurb with that clip so that somebody would be able to see, like we were talking about, an aggregation of those, which in some sense is like a playlist, and that's what
Right.
Tomer Sharon calls them.
But so we end up with a fair amount of clips. We have a video compilation we made about how students feel, the emotions they experience when they get a research assignment, the anxiety and the worry and the stress, and then the sense of accomplishment when it's done. So there's a variety of things you can associate with that. But I'm going to tell you a first phase that we're going to implement is we're going to take our user research repository, which is again internal, it's all of the reports, and our brand new user researcher named Arthur Hayden started this week, and Arthur's one of his top 5 objectives for the first few weeks is going to be just to categorize those reports. So we're not going to break them down initially. We're just going to say, if you're looking for information about how students search, here are 5 great places to start, with maybe a blurb about each one. But what we're realizing is the self-serve option, when the report is what's at the end of that journey, it's just that the serving size is too large. It's too dense. And so maybe what we're doing is a brief screencast to introduce the findings. Maybe we're taking a few key slides and creating, a Camtasia screencast to say, here's the meaning behind them. Because for lots of reasons, we don't put all of the detail on the slides, because when we're at a conference, we have information to protect as well when we share it externally. So it can be a lot, or it can be more lean, but pushing information to people in digestible bits, and that's another reason infographics do very well, because it's just the right serving size of findings. I hope this helps.
It does help, and all of those different types of nuggets, they're in a searchable website?
They sure will be. And so one of the things that Arthur, our new researcher extraordinaire, will be doing is when he's curating a playlist on search or authentication, he's going to go into our user testing account or into our Qualtrics account and mine previous studies and pull out representative clips. He's going to pull heat maps from studies that we've done in Qualtrics, and he's going to, in our new emotion analytics software, he's going to queue up relevant studies and create these clips and create this dossier on topic X. Go, Arthur.
Good luck, Arthur.
Is there one more question, maybe? Or? Great, thank you so much, wonderful panelists.